Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Conscious Club podcast. Right as I was hitting record today, I just remembered the intention that I have to make this podcast. Like, I want the vibe of this podcast to be less like an educational podcast, even though I feel like I definitely do teach concepts in these episodes. I want it to feel less like a formal education podcast type thing and more of just like listening to a friend talk to you. Yeah, like I think in a lot of my work, actually, that's definitely one of the vibes that I really enjoy anchoring into the community spaces that I create, whether it's like a community space like Overflow where I'm interacting daily with the members personally, or even just like in a community where I'm not super directly interacting. Like, for example, this podcast community, the community of people who listen to this podcast. Even for this, like, I want you guys to feel like I want this to be an easy listening kind of thing and something that you feel like you can put on whenever you feel like you don't have to feel like you don't have to be in like a very specific state of mind. You don't have to be like very specifically in learning mode in order to want to listen to this podcast or want to tune in or anything. It's like we're like, oh, I'm bored. Let's see what Areege has to say. You know, like that's the vibe. Anyways, so today, also let me just give you a little rundown on how, like, what my process looks like when I record these podcast episodes. So first of all, I want to congratulate myself because this is by far the most consistent I've ever been with this podcast, or just with like regular content at all. And I mean, like, this is the most consistent I've been while also feeling like it's sustainable consistency. Like, I'm consistent with this, and I also don't feel like it's draining me and that I can't hold on to it any much longer, you know, because I think I've definitely posted a few weeks straight of podcasts or YouTube videos or whatever in the past, but in the past, every time I was doing that, there was always this part of me that was like, I don't know, this might just like break apart any moment now, because essentially the way that I was doing it, the processes and the systems that I had set up, recurring processes and systems that I had set up for myself to follow every week, they just weren't sustainable for me. They felt too draining. And so obviously force can only take you so far. And at a certain point, like, I fell off the horse, you know what I mean? Because I was like, at a certain point, like, if getting something done over time, like consistently, is taking more energy than it's giving you, then at a certain point, you're going to realize that it's not worth it. And then your motivation is just going to dissolve into thin air. Hope that made sense. But yeah, like this now, like how I've been doing this season, how the behind the scenes have been looking, how I set up the process for myself of recording and uploading and promoting the podcast episodes, it feels very doable and very simple and straightforward for me, which makes it really easy to get myself to do every single week. So the kind of what I wanted I was like, what was I saying? So I just lost my train of thought, and it's also not in my editing process to edit things out, so you will hear this part, which is fine. I'm excited to be here. Okay, so I think I'm remembering what I was talking about. So I think what I was saying was that the behind the scenes what I wanted to share with you was what the behind the scenes process of recording this episode feels like. It looks like. When I sit down to record, I just kind of see what is the thing that I feel most excited to talk about in that moment. So I don't do a lot of like pre-planning for these episodes. I just kind of trust that whatever is the topic that is kind of at the forefront of my mind right now and something that I feel really excited to have like a 20 to 40 to even an hour podcast session talking about, that's what I will make the episode about. And I usually just have like a sentence or a concept, and then I just also trust that as I start talking that more of the content will land, and I'll end up saying a lot of things that I am actually surprised that I said, and that when I rewatch it, the episode, that I'll learn something too from my own verbal processing. So yeah, and then other than that, the system is like I just do it every Sunday or Monday. I'm still deciding whether I enjoy doing it on Sunday. I do enjoy doing it on Sunday because Sunday is a very spacious day for me. So it kind of feels nice to just like, with nothing else to do that day, it's kind of nice to have an afternoon where I'm just like, oh, I get to like record a podcast. But as the weather is starting to get warmer, we are heading into spring. During the warmer seasons, weekends are definitely busier because there's more people that come around. Like Garrett's family, Garrett's parents are up and visiting more often, more weekends, and sometimes they have friends over. So I think like moving into the summer and stuff especially, it's going to be harder for me to record these on the weekend, on the Sunday. So that's why I've kind of been playing with like Sunday or Monday. So zoom out a little bit. The basic process that I follow for recording this, the basic system that I've created for myself to have to keep my podcast alive is every Monday I sit in front of a camera. I just hit record. I get my phone out and I hit record on my phone as well. And then I have a general concept that I feel like I want to talk about that day. And then I just start talking and see what happens. So that is like a very fun way for me to do this. I feel like if I did try to make it more structured, because I felt like, oh, if I make it more structured, or if I just am more rigid with each episode and I edit it more so that I have less pauses, or I'm like making less mistakes, etc. I feel like if I did do that, that's just going to make this process not fun for me anymore. And then eventually I'll just end up stopping recording and making these podcasts at all because it's not a fun process. So, moral of the story, I think I spoke about this in the very first episode of this season as well. I think which I titled, I just realized I'm enough, so now I'm going to have fun with this. Just this message is just a reminder of that, like to myself and to anyone who's listening to whom it's relevant as well. It's like, if you want to do something, just make it as fun as possible for yourself so that you can actually keep doing it and that you don't develop a negative relationship to it, because there's obviously a reason why you want to do it in the first place, right? There's probably a personal reason, like there's probably a reason that it's going to help you a lot in your own personal life. For me, for example, this podcast is really helping me train in consistency and train in articulation and train in trusting myself to be able to speak about things on a whim in a way, like my ability to see that I have the ability to just, like maybe not perfectly and maybe not perfectly articulately, but I do have the ability to just riff on a topic for like 20 to 30 minutes. And at least for myself, it comes out, like from my perspective, when I listen back, I enjoy it a lot. So there's like a personal motivation for me, but also perhaps a reason why I want to do this podcast is because there's people who listen to this regularly that actually do take away a lot of insight and are impacted by what I say, what I just happened to say in these episodes. So obviously there's a reason why you have a desire to create something in the first place. So why would you not make it fun for yourself? Because if you make it not fun, then like I said, eventually you're going to run out of steam and you're just going to drop the whole thing because you're going to be like, what's the point? Why is it worth it? Like, the sense of feeling depleted by it is going to overshadow any sort of motivation that you had, and inspiration that you had to create in the first place. So, segue into today's topic that I thought of right before I hit record, which was I wanted to talk about routines and how to implement routines and structure into our lives, especially as people who really enjoy being in the flow. I really, really enjoy being in the flow, right? Like the reason why it's fun for me to record my podcast in this way is because it allows me to play with the flow. I just hit record and then I see what's gonna flow. I have no plan and I just enjoy the magic of, like, I just enjoy seeing the magic that comes up that's unplanned and unstrategized. And it's just really intriguing for me to interact with this aspect of our reality, this aspect of a reality that extends beyond human control. It's really fun for me to do that. But I find it really fun, but sometimes it's really easy to go too far into the flow, right? It's like, oh, I find this fun, so let me just keep doing this. For me, within with the example of this podcast, going too far into the flow would be to also, this is for me personally, it will look different for everyone, but for me personally, going too far into the flow with this podcast would be to, one, record from flow like I'm doing now, but then also decide to record from flow as well. When I do that, when I just kind of wait for the whim and like decide, I don't post as often as I really want to post. I don't upload these podcasts. I don't create these podcasts as often as I want to, because there's still an aspect of recording this podcast that feels edgy for me, and there's some discomfort here. And so sometimes our flow, this is what I was speaking about in our last episode as well, sometimes our flow can be self-sabotage, because sometimes we can avoid the things that are uncomfortable that we do actually really want to do, because we know that they're going to stretch us and expand us and grow us in the ways that we want to grow. But because they're uncomfortable, we avoid them. And then we call it, oh, we're in flow. And the flow is not letting me deal with this thing. So for me, it's like all about finding the balance between flow and structure, and recognizing when flow turns into self-sabotage. And when you do recognize that, then getting really real with yourself and asking yourself, okay, if I feel like I am self-sabotaging myself in this domain, for example, in this podcast, what kind of structures do I want to implement that will help me show up in the ways that I actually truly, truly desire to? When I dissolve the discomfort and the stretchiness feels, how much do I actually want to show up? And for me in this podcast, it's like weekly. I really want to show up weekly. I really want to do this weekly. I want to record weekly. I want to upload weekly. And to do that, I have to implement the routine of showing up, like picking a day, which for me is, I'm just going to decide now, it's just going to be Mondays or Sunday. Okay, it's hard. Okay, I'm going to flow within Sunday and Monday. See, you can flow, you can structure within the flow. There's so many configurations of how you do it. But the structure for me is either on Sunday or Monday, I have to sit down and record something. And obviously, some days I feel tired, or I feel like I don't have anything interesting to say, or that I feel like I have an edible hangover. Like today, I just took way too much of an edible last night, and I just didn't, it was just too much. Anyway, and I woke up the next morning and I just felt a little bit less present than usual, and I was like, oh no, I have to film a podcast today. But because I'm devoted to my structure and to my routine, I'm showing up anyway. And guess what? I'm recording this now, and I don't think it matters that much. I don't think that, I all of a sudden don't feel my edible hangover. So I guess what I really want to talk about in this episode is that how do you deal with that? How do you implement routine when you're super averse to it? When you really, really love the flow, how do you begin implementing structures and routines into your life in a way that's sustainable long term? And for me, like, again, I'm going to say it again, make it as fun as possible and make it as easy as possible. If you're someone who currently has absolutely no routine, which might sound crazy to people who are like working jobs and stuff, it's like, how could someone not have any routine whatsoever? But yeah, like for me, over the last 2 years, over the pandemic, working from home, working for myself, and like I didn't have that much routine. Like I was just really operating fully from flow. And then last year I started putting in some structures because I was like, you know what, the flow, being too in flow, it kind of feels unsafe, it kind of feels scary, it kind of feels unpredictable and chaotic. So I'm going to put structure in. But anyway, if you are someone like that who's like feeling a little unsafe and feeling like reality is a little too unpredictable for your liking, and that you do want some illusion, some more of like, you want to feel more of the illusion of certainty. Let's put it like that. You want to feel like more in control of things. Play with structure, play with routine, and start easy. Start with like very easy routines. Like pick a task that you enjoy doing. Okay, whatever it is for you. What's a good I'm like running into my block with finding examples again. Okay, whatever. Say that you really enjoy sweeping the floor. No, you know what? Say you really enjoy vacuuming with the Dyson. You know those Dyson vacuums, they just like are so satisfying. I actually really do enjoy vacuuming with a Dyson. And like the actual sensation of doing it feels energy giving to me because I like how satisfying it feels to see all the dust being picked up. And I also really enjoy the feeling afterwards of having like a clean home. So that's I've identified an activity that I enjoy. So now to build up my capacity to hold structure and routine, I can just be like, okay, how often do I want to vacuum? And then I decide I want to vacuum once a week. And then I decide, okay, once a week, what day of the week? I decide that I want to vacuum on Fridays. Okay, Fridays. Great. So you can leave it there. Or if you really want to build up your capacity to hold structure, pick like morning, afternoon, evening, nighttime. Pick like a little section of the day. Like get more micro. And then, okay, say like Friday evening is when I really like to vacuum because I feel like in the process of vacuuming on Friday evening, I get to like really reset the energy of the week and have start going to the weekend with like a very fresh feeling. So now that I've decided that, now every week on Friday evenings, I am going to set a reminder for myself or put it on my calendar or something and just practice showing up to that task of vacuuming. The reason why this is like starting easy is because this is for a task that you actually already enjoy doing. When it comes to tasks that are a bit more difficult, like or feel a bit more edgy, it can be harder to uphold a routine, obviously, because first of all, you're uncomfortable about holding a routine and having to show up to something at a certain time and date because maybe you have past trauma or past negative associations with like scheduling. Maybe, for example, your parents like overscheduled you and you always felt depleted all the time and like you had no energy. And so now part of your brain just assumes that scheduling is going to lead to burnout, which is not true. So if for example, if you want to record a podcast, but recording a podcast is super uncomfortable to you, but also it's super uncomfortable for you to hold any sort of routine or consistency, then probably having the intention to record a podcast every Monday is not going to be sustainable for you to hold because you have to first neutralize the discomfort. Like you have to neutralize the levels of discomfort until they are manageable. And also it's okay if we often will also find that we judge ourselves for how much we can handle or can't handle. It's like I feel like we often are like, what? How am I having such a hard time with this? Like I should be able to handle more than this. I should be able to handle more discomfort than this. But it's like, just stop judging yourself. Like, a lot of the time it's just related to like nervous system, it's related to past experiences that you didn't have conscious control over. Like, there's so many factors that go into your capacity to deal with discomfort. And first of all, like, step one, stop judging yourself. And when you stop judging yourself, you can actually start and build up the capacity and start like making your days, living your days in the ways that you actually want to live them, and not feel bad about yourself and not feel unproductive, and actually feel like you're making the moves that you want to be making every day. But yeah, start simple. And like, once, for example, back to the vacuum example, it's like, once you get to a point where it's like you no longer feel the discomfort, like you feel like you can show up every Friday evening to vacuum, and you get excited about it, because that's what ends up happening in my experience. Is like, once you start dissolving your discomfort to routine and having to show up at a pre-planned timing, once you start like once you start dissolving your discomfort to that, you begin to see the benefits of it, and then you begin to enjoy it. Because, for example, a benefit of vacuuming every Friday evening is that every weekend you never have to worry about your house feeling dirty. And that's such a benefit. And so you begin to see, like, once the initial discomfort of routine dissolves, you begin to see its actual benefits that it brings into your life. Like, it just elevates your life in so many different ways, and your eyes begin to open up to that. And when that happens, it becomes enjoyable to show up. And then once that happens, then you can build yourself up to greater discomfort. Then maybe you could also have a weekly routine where you record a podcast, because now that you've neutralized the discomfort of showing up to routine a little bit, then that gives you enough capacity to deal with the discomfort of showing up to, like, whatever is left of the discomfort, if any, of showing up to routine, but also the discomfort of recording a podcast and listening to yourself talk and just like dealing with all of that. So yeah, I really like the term like titrate yourself. Like, when you want to step up into holding more discomfort and whatever that looks for you. For me right now, it's like, I want to have more responsibilities, because when you hold, the more responsibilities you hold, the more power and choice you have. That's something that I'm working on, but I have to kind of take it slow, because holding responsibility is holding risk, and risk is uncomfortable, because there's parts of me that are still really, really afraid to make mistakes. So for me, like, I'm titrating my system to be able to handle more responsibility. And it's like a step-by-step process. You kind of pick something that feels easy to you, and then once you feel like you've stabilized that, then you add something else, and then you stabilize that, then you add something else. And this is also going to help everything feel sustainable, and like you can actually hold it, because you're taking it step by step, and you're building a foundation, like one off of another. You're not just like, and you're not going too fast. So a really great mantra to remember generally in all life, but especially as you are trying to build in more routines and structures and systems into your day-to-day, is there's no rush. There's no rush. Like, sometimes you will feel completely overwhelmed by the like some Fridays might be easier to show up to the vacuuming. Some Fridays might be completely like overwhelming. So just take it slow and allow yourself grace. Like, first of all, like, okay, something that comes up too is like perfectionism. It's like, oh, I don't want to like do this right now because I don't really feel good. And if I don't feel good, then I'm not going to produce good work. This is, I guess, makes more sense for the podcast than for the vacuuming. But okay, let's just move back to switch to the podcast example. If I've set a weekly podcasting commitment for myself, then on the days where I don't feel like myself, like today, there's a fear that I have, like, oh, if I record today, then I am going to not make as good of a work. And so therefore there's like aspects of me that don't want to record. I like just kind of challenge that and let yourself just exist as you are naturally, and allow life to show you that it's totally okay for you to just show up as you are. and that you can hold commitments and you don't have to hold the commitment and show up absolutely perfectly. And then secondly, if you do miss a commitment, also understand that that's also part of being human and that you'll just show up next time. And just because you missed one doesn't mean that you have to now give up completely. So yeah, that's my message for today. Thank you for listening. And yeah, I guess I do have a few announcements. Number one, I just launched Overflow's Instagram profile page. And Overflow, for those that don't know, is my business and creation mystery school. The links will always be in the show notes. That's a mystery school. It's kind of like, it's like a community space and school, and it's like in the format of like a monthly subscription membership. So one of the ideas that I had for like marketing this thing that I have created was creating like a separate Instagram page where that kind of acts like a window into the mystery school. So it's essentially like a Instagram page that operates on its own. Like you don't need to be subscribed to Overflow to be able to enjoy what the value that the Instagram page brings. It's just like it's kind of a separate thing, but it's affiliated. So I just launched that yesterday. So I'm also going to leave the link in the description if you want to check that out. This is the first time I've ever played with like batch content creation, which feels really exciting for me because I get to like schedule posts and like it feels like a huge up level in my world, because for my main account, pre-scheduling things has just not felt right or something that I could do yet. So it feels cool that I get to play with it with Overflow, and then maybe at a certain point I can also start to play with it with my main posts. But yeah, that's really exciting. That's like the main thing. And then another thing is that I made a post today on Instagram about automation and backend automation, and as an online business owner, basically the concept of that whole concept of that reel was like, I feel like a core pillar of having a nourished and sustainable and scalable online business is implementing backend automation. So noticing where in your business you have recurring interactions or tasks that are like repeating all the time, and then setting up automations to handle those so that you don't have to manually deal with it with your own time, or you don't have to hire like an actual person to manually deal with it. So anyway, that was what the post is about. And I also, at the end of it, I was like, I'm kind of thinking of creating, because I know that I'm someone that's really good at this with like my computer science background, and then also being in the world of online business and content creation and coaching and like all, like I know a lot about the different types of like online businesses there are out there, including like coaching, but also being an influencer, things like that. And I feel like I could merge those two worlds together and really help people who have online businesses automate tasks, like maybe like just like help them explore this world of backend automation to make their lives easier and to free up more of their life force so that they can allocate more time, energy, and money elsewhere. So I basically am thinking of setting up like an offering where I personally help people with that. But I only have like this concept so far. It's like, it's probably gonna be like a 2-part offering, where the first thing, there's gonna be a consultation where we hop on a call and you basically tell me about the different like what your business workflow looks like, and we kind of examine it, and then I give suggestions on where you could automate, like, oh, you can automate this section, or you can automate this section. And then part 2 is like, you can either take those suggestions and like automate yourself, or you can hire me to do it for you. So that's like kind of what I'm thinking. But I feel like I really need a few people, like 3 people or something, to like experiment with, so I can develop this offering into something that I offer more regularly to people in my world. So if you're interested in like helping me experiment with this, then please send me a DM on Instagram at Areege Chowdhury, link in the bio. And if you're listening to this way later than the release date of this podcast, then maybe just make sure that I'm still doing, like, it's still relevant. Like, don't come at me like 5 years from now about this, like, But yeah, just be smart. I just say that because sometimes, like even now, sometimes I have these YouTube videos from like 5 years ago, and I'll have like a call to action from that YouTube video. And I'll get like messages today of people being like, hey, can you add me to this group chat, or like, can you do this? And I'm like, God, like that was like 5 years ago. That's not even active anymore. But I'm sorry. Like, I just feel so bad. But anyway, that was a side note. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. I will see you next week, because I am getting good at routine, and I am also getting to the point where I'm enjoying this routine. I love you. Mwah.